So welcome everyone to AI Knowledge Bites and Artificial Intelligence in Libraries Lunch and Learn series brought to you by Minitex. And I have just a couple opening slides here before we turn it over to our two presenters today. If you attended the first Lunch and Learn series, we followed this format, but we're mixing it up a little bit today. We have two presenters to show you 4 tools. So we expanded the time just a little bit. So we'll spend about 40 minutes or so of content, so a little longer, but there's still going to be plenty of time for Q&A, and we'll try to reserve Q&A to the end. However, if you do have a question, while the presenters are showing a tool that's real timely, we might break in and ask the question. But for the most part, we'll be keeping questions to the end. And you can ask your questions by either putting them in the chat or raising your hand using the raise hand tool. We definitely like to hear people's voices, so we welcome that as well. And then if we do happen to end early, well, if there's robust conversation happening, there's really no need to end early, but there's also no pressure for you to stay if you have to go off to an afternoon meeting. And we are recording this session, so we'll make it available as soon as we can. There may be a little bit of a delay because we'll be making sure the captions are perfect before we share it out on the Minitex YouTube channel. So we'll follow up with an email after when those are available, as well as any handouts or resources that the presenters would like to share. So with that, I think I'll go to the next slide and we'll do some introductions. So today you're going to hear from 2 speakers, Mozhdeh Khodarahmi. She is the Associate Library Director of Access, Instruction, and Research Services at Macalester College, which is located in St. Paul, Minnesota. And Brigid McCreery is also joining us. She is the Research and Instruction Librarian, also at Macalester College, where she works primarily with natural sciences and emerging technologies. And then also, I should introduce myself, Sarah Ring, Minitex. I'm a continuing education librarian here. I'll be your main host and moderator. So you'll be hearing from me speaking throughout most of the hour. And then Beth Statz from Minitex, she's waving, I think, right now, is our outreach and instruction librarian, and she'll be helping me out by monitoring the chat and your questions. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing, and we're going to turn it over to our first speaker. Take it away, and thank you for joining.
Hey, hi everyone. Thank you so much, Sarah and Beth. Brigid and I are truly delighted to be here with you today. So in our presentation today, we thought that we are going to have a very brief introduction first to talk about the transformation in libraries and how technologies impacted librarians and library services. We will have a glimpse at the evolution of AI to understand better what's the difference between AI research tools we are talking today and the regular research tools that we are using. And then I would like to argue, as proud librarians, we are, if not best equipped, very well equipped with the expertise for the age of AI and how we can leverage those skills. Then we talk about some power tools for research, with which Brigid is going to actually have some demonstration for you on 2 of the search engines, AI search engines, and 2 of the AI tools that can be used for literature maps and more of visualization tools. And then in the end, we are going to take a look at the future a little bit. We go futuristics. So historically, we know that for over 5,000 years, libraries have served as repositories of knowledge and information, from the clay tablets, stone tablets, to the print, which was revolutionary at that time, libraries have always evolved and changed their services based on the need until we got to about 1990s. Next slide, please. So when internet went public in 1993, all of a sudden another world was opened up, world of information. That's when digital literacy and digital world in general was introduced. Many of you may remember the time that people were talking about, oh my God, what's the impact of digitization on libraries? Do libraries survive? Is it end of libraries? But we all know now that we not only survived, but we also thrived. The digitization helped many of the services that we are providing now to be even more accessible. But it required us to really evolve and use that technology to the best that we can. You may remember the Wikipedia in 2001 and all the conversation about should we use it, should we not use it? And truly, I feel proud that as people in the world of information, we always took the lead on training people, on educating people on how to use these new tools. We introduced the information literacy concept of we have to always check for credibility, reliability, authorship, purpose, bias, and we took the role on educating everybody as how to use this resource. But of course, with the technology comes concerns. All of a sudden, everybody was exposed to an overwhelming amount of information. So information overload was something that we had to address. We have to talk about making sure what we are getting are reliable and accurate. The digital divide was another concern. The difference between people who had access to internet and don't. And I can say it is still a concern. Of course, academic integrity, distraction, and attention span, which is just shrinking every day, and privacy and security are other topics that made us really concerned. So think about all of those and what we are facing right now. A couple of years ago, all of a sudden, the generative AI took us by storm. I personally learned on my way to work about ChatGPT and how can it impact education. So we thought it's really good to take a brief look at what it is, what's all of this conversation about. And our last presenter at the Lunch and Learn did a fantastic job of going over that. But I thought it might be good to take a 2-minute look at that with the purpose of understanding the AI research tools we are introducing here today. So considering the artificial intelligence being the large topic, there are some main subcategories of that: machine learning, deep learning, and generative AI or Gen AI, which the tools we are talking about today are mainly the last two categories, are in Gen AI and deep learning part of it. So artificial intelligence is a concept that was born in 1950s during the World War II. And the main idea is if we could give some of the human tasks to machines, and they can perform something that normally requires human intelligence. This image is from the movie, The Imitation Game. Many of you may have seen it. Remember the conversation about can a machine think or not? That's the concept that people started thinking about it since then. But this concept evolved. Since 1950s, it was something that scientists started thinking about it. But later on, in 1980s, Brigid, if we can go to the next one, please. That's when the concept of machine learning was introduced mainly. That's when group of software engineers will translate what we want to ask the machine with the language of the machine, with coding, with computer language. We all know, HTML and Python, all those languages, in order to do a specific task. And it worked. It worked very well. One example of that is like in the healthcare system, when you enter some codes and it will help organizing, what the situation was and sending it, for example, for the insurance company. But it requires a lot of work on the, coding aspect of it. It's very labor intensive. So scientists, as always, think about what's the next step and how can it make it more effective and easier. Thought, what if we could teach machine to learn on its own? That's when the concept of deep learning comes. In deep learning, it still requires the first programming that they are using a system which is similar to humans' nervous system. And that's what's called neural network. It's really have the neural in it. Instead of neurons, there are a lot of nodes that they are connect with each other, and they can translate what they get to another, output that is purposed for this model. So deep learning requires the first programming, but then machine starts to learn on its own. It doesn't require somebody to be there and train it over and over again or supervise the learning. One movie that's available for free on YouTube, if you haven't watched it, I strongly recommend you to watch it. It helps us understand the concept of deep learning. Deep learning is AlphaGo, is a documentary about a group of scientists that they were working on DeepMind project, created this program and trained it on the most complex game in the world, which is the game of Go. They called that AlphaGo. So it's about AlphaGo being trained on all the previous games of Go, and then actually go and play against the world champion. The fascinating thing in this story is AlphaGo could actually generate new moves that was not in any of the previous games. Considering the complexity of the game and the creativity of this AlphaGo program, that proved to scientists that deep learning is possible. So what's next? The next step would be, what if we don't need to even code anything? We could talk to a machine, and then the machine would understand and get the job done for us. That's when generative AI comes in play. So generative AI, of course, is sorry, I just got a message that I have to confirm what's the language, and I said English. Generative AI is a concept that's using natural language instead of coding language. So there is no specific language that you need to use. And it's possible only because a group of scientists could create an algorithm called transformer, which they published it in the paper, Attention is All You Need. This transformer model is a very specific, is a very unique type of algorithm. Again, inspired by humans' nervous system. So it has a neural network in it. But the difference is you can just talk to it. And it generates new concepts based on what's trained on. So this is to make the generative AI tools be accurate and be kind of like proper in working, they have to be trained on a huge amount of data. Basically, the current generative AI tools are trained on everything that was published on internet. Plus, personally, I can't even fathom that. But that's why it's extremely expensive. It has other, impacts on the world, which we are not going to discuss today. But it's kind of like an autofill. When you start typing, the machine guess what your next word is. Or sometimes we have autocorrect. This is the more elaborate version of that, much more elaborate version of that. So it generates idea by predicting what's the next word. I can't stress enough that it doesn't have mind, though it has a brain. It has a neural network, but it doesn't have a mind to understand what's doing. It basically predicts what the next word is. So since it's working with natural language, what do we need to use that? We just need to ask good questions. And we need to choose the right words in order to get the right response. And we really need to use an effective framework. All of these is called prompt engineering. I feel the librarians are really well equipped with that. We also should always analyze the result for bias, for accuracy, for reliability, authorship, and the purpose. So think about all of these and think about natural language processing. How do you feel about it now? Do you see why I said that I can argue that we are very well equipped with the expertise to use Gen AI? Don't we really work on teaching our audience how to use search terms? Search terms are prompt engineering. Search terms are the most effective words that we need to use to get the best response. Boolean terms is part of the structure of the word, is part of the structure for search term. It's most effective when we know how to use them. Of course, asking the right question is crucial, and effective use of language. I was listening to a podcast and they were talking about educators. They said one of the main problems that the educators have these days is students do not know how to ask questions. And I thought, oh, I know that. How many times we had people approaching us asking a question while they actually meant something else. They had something else in mind. And we also, I think, are professionals that will teach actually evaluating all of the information that we receive. We are in charge of information literacy, and we always talk about evaluating the result for bias, accountability, reliability, authorship, and purpose. So considering all of these, one thing that we want to always keep in mind is that AI literacy, which can be part of information literacy and critical thinking, should always be considered together. It's so important for us at Macalester that when we created the AI guide, we incorporated critical thinking in the title. So AI literacy and critical thinking guide, which is our LibGuide, is something that if you just search for this term, AI literacy and critical thinking, it should be one of the available, it should be actually one of the first search results after the sponsored one. Macalester one should be the top one. But the important part here is when we use AI, again, we have to make sure we are including critical thinking in how to use it. And look, the concerns are the same, aren't they? If we look at the concerns that we had when the world went digital and looking at the concerns that we have now, they are very similar, if not identical. the information overload, digital divide, and all of those. So we have new tools. As we had new tools when we had access to internet. These tools are actually power tools because they are so easy to use, and we have to make sure we use them properly, as they can be very helpful, expedite the process. They can be very harmful and dangerous, but they are tools, and I say they are power tools. So some of these power tools are the one that Brigid is going to show you now.
Thank you. So I will be talking through some research tools. The four that I will be covering are Semantic Scholar, Elicit, ResearchRabbit, and Open Knowledge Maps. And I will say that these focus a lot on scholarly sources, but they are four pretty different tools that have different uses. And they're all a little bit different in how they retrieve information and how they display information to users. And they use different algorithms and databases as part of their processes. So here you can see a kind of overview. Semantic Scholar is a more like traditional database interface. And then Elicit and ResearchRabbit use more like natural language searching, and Open Knowledge Maps provides a lot of open access resources. And they each have slightly different data sources. So Semantic Scholar actually underlies Elicit and ResearchRabbit, and Open Knowledge Maps uses BASE, the Public Library of Science, OpenAIRE, and some other databases. We will be sharing these data slides. A lot of these tools have some really good papers published about the algorithms that they use and where they get their data and stuff like that. So if you're interested in digging more into where they're pulling their results from, you can click on these links. Semantic Scholar has a whole web page that lists all the publishers that they work with. So like Sage Journals and some of the big like journal vendors you can see on there. And they also have like Archive and some other open access publishers in there as well. And so they each have different use cases that are best. So I will be starting off with Elicit. This tool is really good for getting just like a very introductory summary of a topic. So this one requires a account to log in. I've already created an account, but you can see here that it's just got this nice search box where you can ask a research question. And this again is you can use very natural language. So you can see I've been running some searches down here. It stores your notebooks, and that's what they call their results that they retrieve, and it stores it for you later. But I will ask it, how does wildfire affect groundwater resources? So this might be a question I have. It's fire season. I might be a student looking for some sources on what's going on. And it will take a summary of the top 4 papers. It ranks papers based on like citations and some relevance metrics that Elicit pulls. They don't have a whole lot documented about how it pulls these, but you can see that it has created a summary that's kind of like an abstract for a paper. And it does a pretty good job of actually citing where all of this information comes from. So you can see that, you know, the groundwater levels can be produced, and they point to a case study, the 1996 Honey Boy fire in Utah. And when you scroll down a little bit further, you can see that these are the papers that it's citing. It pulls more than 4 papers. There's 4 in the summary, but there's a whole lot of results. And you can manage these columns over here. So let's say you were interested in the methodologies as well. You can add a column for that. And I'll just toggle this closed. But here you can see, you know, if I'm interested in that honey boy fire, I can scroll down and find the paper here. I can see that it's been cited twice by other resources in this database. I can get a PDF open in a new tab. I can pull the DOI. I can see this 1-sentence summary as well as some of the methods that this research uses. So, you know, identifying wells, using GIS data sets, things like that. The methods sometimes don't end up listing comprehensively, because like Mozhdeh said, it's a lot of it is based on text prediction, and so it can sometimes be a little bit inaccurate, but for the most part, I found that Elicit is pretty precise in what it's pulling from these papers. It can also be sometimes more, it can have better or worse quality depending on some of the metadata that the publishers or the authors have put behind this paper. If you have a paid account, you can summarize more than 4 papers and you can export it. But you can also sort and filter without doing any sort of upgrades. So let's say I have this sort of introduction to my research topic now. I might go to Semantic Scholar and hold on, I gotta pull it. My toolbars are making it hard for me to navigate. Sorry, everybody. Okay, so now I have Semantic Scholar, and this one is you don't want to use natural language for this searching, so you want to do more like keyword searches like you might with other databases. And so you don't have to make an account for Semantic Scholar. So if you're interested in playing around with this one a little bit, you can go to semanticscholar.org and test it out for yourself. But we can just say, you know, wildfire and groundwater. So we can use our Boolean terms for our search and some good keywords. So you'll see that it pulled a ton of results. They have some results from the web and their publisher partners and stuff like that. So it's pulling together a ton of data. And you can see that it is a little more like other search results that you might find on Google or in other places where it's just got like the title and some metadata associated with the results. But you'll also see that some of the results have an AI generated TLDR, which stands for too long didn't read. So it will give you like a 1 or 2 sentence summary of the paper, which can be really helpful. There's Semantic Scholar started off as like a computer science database and had some like specialty subject areas that it's since expanded from, but those original subject areas have a lot more like TLDRs attached to them than some of the other ones. But you can see that it summarizes this. And you can also see a lot of their relevance metrics are based on citation counts. So you can see these when these resources have been studied. It also has these highly influential citations, which are based on like journal impact factors and some of those metrics. But you can also see where it's linked in PubMed. You can save it if you do have an account, and you can generate a citation. You can use BibTeX, MLA, AP, or Chicago, and you can export it if you want. And again, you can build a library and export a bunch of different citations, which can be really helpful for things like literature reviews. Okay. Let's see. Now that I've got maybe some papers that I've identified as useful, I can go over here to ResearchRabbit. which is a very visual tool. So ResearchRabbit kind of pitches itself as like a Spotify for papers. So it's really good for discovering papers that are related to each other and understanding who's citing who and who's co-authoring with who. And once you have a paper or maybe some other ideas, you can take a look at how that resource exists within a network and see some of the connections between other literature. And they've got a column-based interface that we can start looking at. So you'll see that there's like categories and collections. Oh, and it's also got a Zotero connection. So if you want to integrate this with Zotero and manage your references, it can be really helpful for that as well. So you can start a new collection is how you can discover papers. The categories are sort of like you can have collections within a category if you're researching a couple different topics. But you can name it here and we'll say wildfire and groundwater. You can see I've done this a couple times already. But you click in here into your collection and you add papers. So you can do a keyword search, or if you have one that you've already identified that you would like to visualize the network for, you can put in the DOI or the PubMed ID or things like that. So what I might try doing is looking up that Honey Boy fire paper that we saw earlier. And here we have it. And I will add it to the collection. And I can see that it's already been added and click out here. And so just based on this one paper, you can add a couple different papers to the collection to start off with, or you can just start with one paper. That's what we'll do for this demonstration. And you select it and you can see it's got the title, the authors, when it was published, and then this is the abstract of the paper. And over here, you can start to see some of the connections. So let's say I'm interested in finding some similar works. I'll click on this, and it generates these clusters of papers that all reference each other or co-author with each other. And it's a really nice visual of who's who in a topic area, who's publishing, and who's referencing who. So I can see that my paper that I've input is in green here in the middle. And I can see that if I click here, oops, okay. If I zoom in a little bit, I can see that there's some other authors here that I might be interested in. So let's just select Masoner. I can see that here's another paper. It's more about evaporation. It's got the American Water Resources Association, and we can see the abstract and some of the, it's got 39 references, and here's the authors. You can also look at it as a timeline visualization, so it'll kind of cluster them based on when they were published. And then you can also look at first author and last author, so it's not just the first author you're looking at if you're not necessarily interested in only looking at first authorship. And you can see kind of over to the left here, the titles of the papers, and these numbers on references. If I'm interested more in looking at just the works that are referenced within the paper and not necessarily going out and looking for other ones, I can look at all references here. So we can see again, the paper that I input is in green. And we can, you kind of click and drag to move around your little network. But you can see that my author referenced all of these. The green arrows points from your paper to the papers that it references. And then you can see that there's, you know, Jonk referenced Fernandez, who referenced Robichaux, who references these other folks. So, or these other folks also referenced Robichaud. So you can get a sense of like how these papers are connected to one another, which can be really helpful for, you know, again, if you're doing a literature review or just trying to get a sense of like the landscape of publishing in a particular topic, it can be a really interesting way to explore that. It's called ResearchRabbit because you go down a rabbit hole of exploring papers, which is kind of a fun connection. And if you want to look more, you can do some other linked content. You can look at Wikipedia articles that are related and some more like popular sources that are less focused on like academic or scholarly resources. And then the final tool that we'll go over is called Open Knowledge Maps, which is also a sort of network visualization tool, but it's focused more on topic clustering and less on citations. And all of the research results that this will pull are open access. So the previous 3 tools are based on Semantic Scholar, which does have some like paid and subscription resources that you might not necessarily be able to access just because you got a result that is related to your search. But in Open Knowledge Maps, anything you find, you'll be able to access and read right away. And you can either search PubMed for the life sciences or BASE, which is a broader database that will get you results from any discipline. I'm just going to use BASE, even though my research topic might be good in PubMed, but we'll just stick with BASE and make sure we're getting results from any discipline. So this one is, again, you don't necessarily want to use natural language searching. So we'll do another wildfire and groundwater keyword search and click go. Open Knowledge Maps has a ton of data that it looks at. So it kind of takes a little while for this one to run. But it's really nice. They have a lot published about how their algorithm works and where they pull their data from. And they're extremely transparent in their processes. So if you scroll down and you're waiting for your search results to come up, you can look at how it works. And they have FAQs and all sorts of really handy resources about how their algorithms work and stuff if you're interested in getting into the nitty-gritty of the tools. So now we have our results, and you can see it's clustering papers based on topics. So this is pulled from like keywords and also from looking at the text within the papers as well. So it's metadata and text searching. But you can see, you can click here and look at the papers that are in this topic cluster. You can see that they're all open access, and you can get to know some more of the like authors, where it was published, that sort of stuff. And you can see that, you know, within understanding how wildfire affects groundwater, there's a lot of different other topics that you might encounter. So you might learn more about technology or base flow or you see some regional literature. So if you're interested in any of those subtopics, you can click on it and see the papers within that subtopic. You can see that it's pulling 71 of the most relevant documents. And again, they have a lot of great information about how they determine relevance. And we've got data from 1664 to 2024. And they're all journal and newspaper articles. We searched using any language, but it looks like we pulled some Spanish language and some English. And you can learn more about the data quality and stuff like that. And then over to the right here, you have your papers. So we can see that, again, this Honey Boy fire is coming back up again. And you can see the PDF. You can see which areas it's associated with in your topic clustering. You can see the DOI, citations, do APA, MLA, Chicago, or ACM. And then you can export it as a document if you want to as well. So this is a really great tool for, again, kind of visualizing how papers relate to one another, and kind of exploring a subtopic within your topic. And it can be really a great way to like hone in on something more specific that you might be researching. So those are our 4 tools, and I will throw it back to Mozhdeh.
Thank you, Brigid. I will just share that we chose these 4 tools because recently I was at a conference and I learned that many of the libraries in the United States are actually testing these 4 tools. So I thought, oh, okay, so these are good for us to come and test them too. I think we are a little bit short in time and I want people to have a chance to ask questions. Brigid, if we can go not past this slides and next one. Yes, they're here. And if you can, previous one. Sorry, thank you. So we wanted to make sure that we don't say we are replacing any of the databases or anything we have now with the AI tools. That's not really what the intention of this presentation was. We always say we should do this in addition to the traditional methods that we have. So it's always and, it's never or. So in addition to databases that we currently are using, let's just be open in testing these tools and see how they work and how they help us and the patrons to have access to information. And the other responsibility that I hope we have as information professionals is to understand how these works, how AI works, how generative AI works, and to create some kind of a resilience to deep fakes and misinformation. I think libraries have always been active in this realm. So with this, we end our presentation, and thank you so much for being with us. If there is any questions, we are happy to try to answer.
Thank you both so much. That was a lot of great information and a lot of tools I haven't had a chance to explore yet. So thank you. You saved me the time of starting from scratch. Beth, do we have any questions in the chat? And if not, please go ahead and either raise your hand. I see one hand possibly raised, so hold on just a sec, but either please share your questions in the chat or raise your hand and unmute.
Yep, we currently do not have any questions.
All right, we'll give people
So we are
a couple minutes here.
patiently waiting. Okay, we do have a question. Are those 4 tools free?
Yes. All 4 of them are free. Elicit has like a paid upgrade that you can use. There's a limit on the number of searches. I have run a bunch of searches and I have yet to reach that limit. I can't remember what the number is, but yes. I think ResearchRabbit has some paid features if you want to, but you can create an account on, well, Semantic Scholar and Open Knowledge Maps, you don't need an account. ResearchRabbit and Elicit, you need to create an account, but you don't need to necessarily pay to be able to interact with it at least a little bit.
Okay. There was a question and now it just disappeared. Any other questions? Oh,
it's
someone's editing it. Okay. Here's one. Just curious if you see a lot of students or faculty using these AI research tools at your library.
I do know some people who do like lab research, and when they're looking to again, this is like a lot of these tools have really good functionality for finding like seed papers. So when you're just getting started into a topic and you're like, I don't really know where to start, using Elicit to just be like, hey, what are some top papers in this field, are things that I've heard about people doing. I haven't necessarily heard a lot of like literature reviews or like more intensive processes being integrated into anybody's workflows yet, but I think definitely for some surface level searching before you get into the databases and keywords and some of the more like rigorous search strategies is what I've heard. Mozhdeh might have different experiences.
I'm sorry, I was reading the question.
Oh, here, I can reread it. Just curious if you see a lot of students or faculty using these AI research tools at your library.
Yeah, I mean, these AI research tools are really new to all of us, including us as librarians. We librarian team, research and instruction librarian team, started looking into them like since 2 months ago. I have not seen any students using them, but I've talked to faculty that they are using them. Specifically, Elicit and ResearchRabbit are the ones that they are kind of like most popular at this time, and many of the faculty are using it. We decided for the library to kind of like take a more active role in understanding how it is and helping everybody in using them. So no students though. The students are using other Gen AI tools for research, which I think it's something we have to talk about. It's not the best tool when you use ChatGPT for research. It might work, but it's not the best use. So kind of like helping them understand, if you want to use Gen AI for research, use the proper tool. I think it's really important.
Great, thank you. All right, we have another one here. What will these tools uncover that you can't find using Google Scholar, databases, etc.? And what do you usually do? What do you usually do for first Gen AI tools, or what do you usually do first? Gen AI tools or databases or Google?
Brigid, go, and then I add to it.
Okay, that sounds good. So I think like there's definitely a lot to be said for this as maybe just like complementary to databases. It's like Moshe said, it's certainly not replacing traditional databases. I think particularly like each of the four that we talked about today have like slightly different functionality. ResearchRabbit and Open Knowledge Maps do a lot of that sort of like initial visualization that I think Web of Science has some of, and some of the like paid databases, but there's definitely like that like network visualization that I think you can get that you don't necessarily get with like Google Scholar or other databases. The generative AI summaries can also be useful, but then there's also the like question of, sometimes it's not always entirely accurate, so you want to be looking at the papers anyways. So it really just depends on like, where you're at in your research process, I think, and what you're looking for. So if you're like, I just have no idea where to start, typing a question into Elicit can be a great way to start. But if you do have a little bit more knowledge of like what keywords you want to use or what authors you want to start off with, then you might be looking more at the databases or Google Scholar or some of those other more traditional research tools, I would say. So yeah, dependent upon your familiarity with the topic coming into the research process and where you are in your research process, I would say it can be AI versus Google Scholar or databases might be more helpful.
And one more thing that I'd like to add is the difference is, the purpose is to make it easier and faster and more efficient. So if you use like ResearchRabbit, it already gives us the connections with the papers. Still, we have to look at the papers, we have to find them sometimes, but the connection is there. So it makes it easier and more efficient. But that's the first step. And we have to talk about, okay, it's not end of it. We have to look at other aspects of it. Now let's go back and look at databases to see what do we have there that we don't have here, have a full picture. One more thing that I really like is for students to see from the beginning that kind of like mind map. This is the topic, but these are the subtopics. And then they can choose, say, oh, this is really, I didn't even think about this one. Maybe I want to look into it, or this area that I want to study is already well researched. Do I want to spend time to look at this? So having that big picture, I think, is very helpful. But which one do we do first? I think even if you Google something now, the first response you get is generative AI one on top. It tries to come up with an answer for you. It's really case by case. There are times that we use, these AI research tools to provide that mind map and visualization. And there are times that we say, okay, for this one, let's start with databases. The other factor that impacts us as academic libraries is what's the faculty's policy for their course. So we have to always take that in consideration too.
Thank you. All right, another question. Do these tools summarize full text or abstracts? If full text, does this only include open access papers?
That's a great question. So if they do use full text, it is only open access papers. Elicit, I believe, just does abstracts, not the full text. And Open Knowledge Maps, I believe, does the full text and not just the abstracts. ResearchRabbit doesn't have as much documentation, and I can't remember off the top of my head, but most of these tools do have like an FAQ section on their website or other resources so that when you're using them, you can like look up where this information is coming from. And then Semantic Scholar, I believe, also just does the abstracts. I think it's also interesting. I know that like some publishers are looking at doing partnerships with, some of these like generative AI companies or tools and stuff. And, there's, I think, a lot of working out kinks with authors and like rights to papers and things like that, that are certainly still up in the air. So I think right now, mostly they rely on abstracts, but Open Knowledge Maps, because it pulls open resources, can index the full texts.
All right, thank you. Any other questions or comments?
All right, that was the last call for questions, I think. Let's wrap up. I hope I'm sharing the right slide. Hold on a second. Sorry, everybody. Wasn't highlighting my screen here. Okay. So just to wrap up, this is a series. We plan to continue it as long as we can. The next one is September 10th, and we'll be talking about using generative AI to help with event planning and marketing at Natrona County Library, which is in Wyoming. So it's not too late to sign up for these, and I'll put this URL in the chat, but it's also on the slide there. And then if you have suggestions for future topics, please let us know. Or if you have any other comments, if you found this helpful, that's good to know too. That means we'll continue the series. We're hoping to build this up eventually into a Minitex community of interest that's broader. So please give us some feedback if you have a couple minutes. And Alyssa Becknell will follow up with an email when the recording is available, and the presenters will also be sharing a copy of their presentation. And with that, I think we can wrap up the lunch hour for most of us anyway. And please thank your presenters for today. Thank you, Mozhdeh and Brigid, for this extremely illuminating presentation. All right, well, thanks all. Have a good day.